Hi, I'm Doug from Dynamic Computing, and welcome to episode 94 of 10-Minute Amiga Retrocast. The entire month of May, I've decided to center around one of my most neglected computers, the Amiga 1200, that little guy right there. She's a wonderful machine. It's got a Blizzard 040 card in it running at 40 megahertz, 64 megabytes of RAM, a nice Indivision MK2 flicker fixer, just an absolute wonder of a machine. But I seldom use it, and why is that? Well, I use my Amiga 4000 a lot because of its retargetable graphics. I use my Checkmate Amiga 500 with a Vampire in it. I use my Amiga 1000 quite a bit. And there's just so many hours in the day, so the Amiga 1200 doesn't get a lot of use unless I decide to throw in a game, and I'll often play games on my Amiga 1200. So I decided we're going to concentrate on her for the entire month of May, and she's going to get the love that she needs so she doesn't feel neglected. This also happens to be the month of AMayGA. Now, you may have noticed over the past year that several of us retro YouTubers have gotten together and had these sponsored months like Dawcember and Marcintosh. And so May is going to be AMayGA month for everybody. Now, don't tell them, but what these guys don't know is that every month is a celebration of the Amiga, not just May. We'll be talking more about AMayGA as the month goes on. So it was perfect timing when our friend Matthew from AmigaKit.com reached out to me and told me about a product he would be interested in me highlighting on my show. And we're going to take a look at that product right now. Here's the little beauty right here. Now, this doesn't have an exciting name like the Vampire or the Raptor or the Piostorm. This is just the 8 megabyte of RAM / flash expansion for the A1200. This little beauty is a multifunction card that can do quite a few different things. Let's take a little look at it here. First off, it adds 8 megabytes of RAM right on it, and you can set the board to be either 0, 4 megabytes, 5.5, or a full 8 megabytes of RAM. Both the A1200 and A600 have issues when using over 4 megabytes of RAM with the PCMCIA slot. Basically, what happens is that the PCMCIA slot is also designed to handle RAM expansion in the form of a very uncommon 4 megabyte PCMCIA card. But the actual addresses for the RAM are the same as the top 4 megabytes of RAM on Amiga expansion. So if you have a card that uses 8 megabytes of RAM, it blocks the PCMCIA port and PCMCIA no longer works. Now, you get around this by using an accelerator card, which has 32-bit RAM, not the 24-bit RAM that the normal Amiga 1200 uses, and you don't have any issues. It was a poor design choice for sure on Commodore's part, but we can get around it on cards like this by being able to set 8, 4, or a special 5.5 megabytes of RAM that I'll talk about more in a minute. Now, one of the cool things about this card is its ability to support 5.5 megabytes of RAM. Now, it does this with a clever addition to overcome the PCMCIA limitation. It uses a special 1.5 megabytes of RAM in the Ranger RAM area, which is a little used area of the Amiga's RAM mapping that runs slower than fast RAM, about the same speed as chip RAM. Now, traditionally, there's been some kind of bug that's made Ranger RAM a bit flaky. This card corrects those issues, so Ranger RAM on this board is quite stable and compatible, and it means that 5.5 megabytes of RAM is available, and you can continue to use the PCMCIA socket without any problem. Now, Ranger RAM is set at a lower priority than fast RAM, but higher than chip RAM, and it works nicely as WHD load works best with fast RAM, and 5.5 megabyte is plenty for most games. We'll get back to cool ways we can change the RAM on the fly without having to change the jumpers in a minute. Next, we have a socket for a 68882. This is a floating point unit that runs at 40 megahertz. This is an optional component. I've got it installed in mine, but it is an optional component. This is good for programs that will use it, like Image Effects, Art Department Professional, and a couple of demos that want to use the FPU. Most games don't use it, so if you're just doing gaming, totally and completely optional. Next, we have 4 megabytes of non-volatile flash memory on here, which allows us to do several things like being able to swap ROMs on reboot and also store important libraries like SCSI device on Amiga OS 1.3 setups or Workbench library and Icon library for Amiga OS 3.1.4 installs. We'll look closer at that in a moment. Here on the other side, we have a couple of clock port headers. You can use this for like a real-time clock module or the cool new sensor module, which I'll be talking about another time, which can actually read temperatures inside your Amiga's case. This one actually happens to be a combination of the real-time clock and the sensor module. Kind of cool. You can also put things on here like I'm sure you can use the Rapid Road USB on here in case you're already using your internal clock port for something else. Let's put this inside the computer and take a look at what she can do. When you get your new card and install it in your Amiga 1200, one of the things you'll notice is there's an AmigaKit logo that pops up when you first boot the machine. If you hold down the F1 key like I just did, it comes up to this new menu, the AmigaKit A1200 RAM flashboard menu. Here you can do some cool things. For example, I'll go over this more in a few minutes, but if you change this setting here, right now it says as jumpered 8 megabytes. That means I've got the 8 megabyte jumper on the card. I can temporarily override the RAM settings right here and tell it to boot with 8 megs of fast, 4 megabytes plus the 1.5 megabytes of Ranger memory, just 4 megabytes of extra memory so PCMCIA works, or I can turn the RAM off. That's kind of cool. Here is where you change which configuration you're using, which I will go over in detail in a few minutes. And from here, like I've got a PAL configuration, software setup, onboard ROM config, and a couple of other configurations, which we will go over in a few minutes. But for now, let's just boot the machine up. And you'll notice it boots right up into my beautiful Kickstart 3.1.4 screen. Now, when you first install this card, it's going to boot using the ROM that's built right into your Amiga 1200. And you'll notice there's a new icon on your screen called Flash Install. This is an installer that's built right into your new card and allows you to install the flash controlling software right on your Amiga. So we'll go right in here and we'll tell it to install. And you notice it uses just a standard Amiga installer. Welcome to the AmigaKit Flash Configurator Installer. And you need a MUI on here in order for this to work. But I think everyone has MUI. If not, I'll put a link to that in the description. No, we don't want to read the documentation, although it is fantastic Amiga Guide documentation that's with it. Now, once you install this, go into your Workbench disk, and you'll notice a new folder here. I just installed it in the default location, Flash Configurator. We'll head on in there. Now, before we jump right into the configuration of this, let's talk for a second about what just the standard card can do. You see it adds 8 megabytes of fast RAM. This is Amiga OS 3.1.4, so some of it's used up here. I've got about 6 megs free. But if you log into sysinfo and you do a speed test, what you're going to notice is your Amiga is automatically nearly twice as fast as it is without fast memory. Here's your Amiga right here, and here's a standard Amiga 1200 down here. So it's actually over twice as fast. And that's because chip RAM is not particularly fast. And when you go and you add fast RAM to any Amiga 1200, you are going to take better advantage of what you have inside the machine, and it is going to perform much faster. You see it's got 8 megabytes of fast RAM here, 2 megabytes of chip RAM. This would look different if we booted up and changed the RAM configuration to, say, the 4 megabyte or the 5.5 megabyte configuration. You'll also notice that since I am logged in with 8 megabytes of RAM, my PCMCIA card, which I normally have in here, is not recognized by the system. Now, let's see what this can do. And the first thing it's going to do is come up with a nice file menu here. Over on the left-hand side, this represents the files on your Amiga. So for example, if I have all of my ROMs placed in my work folder and my docs folder, I would go here and tell it to look for my ROMs I'm going to transfer over here, or whatever other files I want to. Where are you going to get the ROMs that we want to use in the flash memory of this device? Well, I'd recommend buying Amiga Forever, which I just reviewed last week, and there'll be a link right up there for it. And that will have all the ROMs you need from 1.3 up to 3.1, all of them perfectly legal to use in here. And then I recommend you buy a copy of Amiga OS 3.1.4 from one of the many vendors that sell it. And that will allow you to download the ROM image legally without having to have a physical ROM installed in your computer. So what you do to get files over here, let's say, for example, I wanted to copy the 68020 library over here, in addition to the ROMs I've already copied over. Just find the file that you want, double click it, it moves it right over to the flash memory. Same thing as if you move over your ROM files, just double click them. When you're done, click Save to Flash, and it saves it right to the flash on the actual card. Now in my situation, I've got Amiga OS 3.1, I've got a 1.3 ROM, a couple of 2.04, 2.05 ROM, and a 3.1.4 ROM on here. Notice I've also got moved over here Workbench Library and Icon Library. These are two files that had to be taken out of the Amiga OS 3.1.4 ROMs in order to save space. So if you've ever noticed on that operating system, if you try and boot a floppy without those files on it, you will get an error message. This prevents that. It allows you to keep those files on this flash drive, and then no matter what you boot to, those files are available. Kind of cool. Now let's go over here to configurations. This is where we're going to be configuring our boot options. We have some nice options here. You can create a new boot option by either creating and naming a new one. Here's Create Config, or you can clone an existing configuration. Now, you'll notice this one says Kickstart 3.1.4 config. It's set to default config, which means this is what will boot when we just cold boot the machine. And I can tell it right here, I can see right here exactly what is being used in this configuration. The Kick 3.1.4 ROM, the boot splash screen, the ROM disk device, the icon library, non-volatile library, which is used to read the flash drive, and the workbench library. Every time I boot, these are the files that will be used. Now, these are the other files on the flash. Everything is just in the root of the flash. There's no subdirectories in here. So if I wanted to get rid of this, I click Remove, and I wanted instead the 1.3 ROM over here. Now, why would I do that? There it is right there. We're going to remove that and put our proper ROM back on there. Just double click it, boom, right there. You click on Save to Flash and it saves that to the flash disk. Now, when you cycle through these configurations, you can see other configurations that have been created. Here's a Kickstart 1.3. Yes, that will actually work on an Amiga 1200. I've got a 1.3 ROM in here, the boot splash screen, non-volatile library. Just for laughs, let's see if we can do the ROM disk device too. I don't know if that works under 1.3, but we'll find out. We'll save that. Now, we've got our 2.4 and 2.05 configs that use the specific ROMs. We've got this one, which is kind of cool. This is the PAL Kickstart 3.1.4. When I choose this on boot up, my machine will boot into PAL mode so I can play PAL games like the Awesome Worthy or maybe Reshoot R. You do that by copying over the config, renaming it, and then under screen mode, either default, which is NTSC for mine, force it to NTSC mode, or force it into PAL mode. Now, every time I choose this option on boot up, my machine will come up as a PAL machine, which is really, really cool. Once you've created your various configurations here, you can just make sure you save everything to flash. This other configuration, software setup, what this is this is the initial setup here. You're using your own ROM that's on your motherboard. Same thing here, onboard ROM configuration, and you'll be able to install the software using either of those two configurations. When you're done configuring the contents of your flash, you can exit out of here. If you want to back up your flash, you can back it up by choosing that option right there, and it will create a copy of the 4 megabytes of flash. If you get a new version of the flash ROM, if say our friends at AmigaKit have a new update for the flash ROM and you want to flash that, what you do is you boot up using your onboard Kickstart libraries. You do not boot up using one of the Kickstarts that's saved on this device. Then you can click on Restore Flash and just browse to the location of your flash file that they've sent you and update your card. Actually kind of cool. Let's take a look at how this works by rebooting right now and booting up Amiga OS 1.3. So we're going to just do Amiga Control, then we'll hold down the F1 key to get into our early boot menu for the card. We'll leave it at 8 megs of fast RAM. We'll change this to Kickstart 1.3 config. Click Reboot. Now on mine, every once in a while, after I do this, I need to do Amiga Control to reboot again. But I think it's an issue with my SCOM Amiga 1200. The guys at AmigaKit say you normally don't have to do that. Now, look at this. We've got an Amiga 1200. We're booting up. It's asking for an actual Kickstart 1.3 disk, which I have right here. Let's boot her up. And looky here, we boot up to a nice Amiga 1.3 Workbench screen with 10 megabytes of RAM free. There's the flash install button. We can go ahead and go into Workbench and everything works exactly as you would expect it to.
Is the best Amiga YouTube channel on planet Earth.
I could not have said it better myself, Amiga 1200. Now you can also do some really cool things with this. You know, in addition to running Workbench off a floppy, you can run Workbench 1.3 off of a hard drive just fine on your Amiga 1200. What you're going to end up doing is copying SCSI device, which you'll be able to find online. There's a couple of sources for it, or maybe copy it off another one of your disks. And you're going to put that in the flash memory under your Amiga OS 1.3 configuration. Once you do that, your SCSI devices will be recognized here, and you can actually create a nice bootable partition for Amiga OS 1.3. Kind of cool. Now, there's no particular reason that you can't just take a flash drive and make a couple of partitions on it. One of them for 1.3, one of them for 2.1, one for 3.1, one for 3.1.4. And then maybe create a little script that on boot up detects which ROM you're using and will automatically just assign the proper partition to boot from. I don't think it'd be that hard to do. With Amiga OS 2.1 or above, you can also go into the early boot menu, holding down both mouse buttons, and choose which of your partitions to boot from. So, you know, you hold it down, you boot to 2.1, hold it down again, choose 3.1, depending on which ROM you choose. Should work just fine. So let's take a look at how we can still use our PCMCIA card at our convenience. We're going to reboot again. We're going to hold down the F1 key and get to the early startup menu. Now in this case, we're going to switch back to our regular default configuration. There we go. Let's do it in PAL mode just for laughs. We're going to go into PAL mode. But this time, we're going to tell it to use 4 megabytes of fast and 1.5 megabytes of Ranger RAM. When I click reboot and give it a couple minutes to restart, we should be at a nice Amiga screen. And this is assuming that you don't leave your Workbench 1.3 in the floppy when you reboot. Because it just booted to floppy. It's got the Hyperion ROMs and it booted to Workbench 1.3. There we go. Kickstart 46.2.1. Oh, look at that Workbench version. I think we've confused the daylights out of it. Let's reboot again without that floppy in there. There, we're all rebooted. This time we've booted into PAL mode. I specifically chose the PAL mode so I could play those games like Reshooter and Worthy that require a PAL Amiga to run. And you'll also notice that I've got less fast RAM available. We're down to 5.5 megabytes. Let's take a look at that real quick in sysinfo. If we look at the memory, we've got 4 megabytes of fast RAM, 1.5 megabytes of slow RAM, it's called, and 2 megabytes of chip RAM. We've also got accessibility to our PCMCIA card right now. So we can see everything on there. It's formatted in FAT32. And this is a great way to get your actual ROMs over to the flash on the new card. You just format your CF card for FAT32, make sure you have the drivers loaded so it's recognized on your Amiga, and then put your ROMs right on here, boot up with the 5.5 megabytes of flash memory, fast memory, and then when we use our flash configuration utility, we can just move our ROMs right over. There's a 3.0 ROM, 3.1 ROM, there's a Kickstart 3.1.4 ROM. We can put all those right over there. Now, what this is perfect for is WHD load, and using 5.5 megabytes of fast RAM for WHD load is probably fine. So if you want to just set the jumper on yours to 5.5 megabytes of RAM, you get the benefits of having nice amount of fast RAM, you get the extra speed ups, and you have full access to your PCMCIA slot without having to dink around and change any settings on boot up. In my case, I just find it easy enough to enable the PCMCIA when I need to use it. Reboot, hold down F1, boom, I'm in. Now, another interesting thing about this board is it has the same kind of non-volatile memory that the CD32 had for saving game positions and things like that. It just has 8 times more memory than the CD32 had. So if you're using WHD load, which again is a fantastic use of this device, you can run CD32 games from WHD load and it will see the non-volatile memory as CD32 memory, and you can do, your save states and whatever else you need to right there in that memory. Kind of cool. So, how much is this little device? Well, it's about $100 American, okay? You add in the 68882 floating point unit, that adds another 25 bucks. You want to put on the temperature sensor with a real-time clock, it's about 27 bucks. Real-time clock alone, about another $15. So it's not very expensive in the overall scheme of things. Considering this gives your Amiga 1200 about the same capabilities as the Romulator that I reviewed quite a while back for your Amiga 500 and 2000. And it adds the 8 megabytes of memory and the other features that I went over. 100 bucks is not a bad deal for it. So considering that you can probably find an A020 or an A030 card for about $200 to $225, and this is $100, does it make more sense to get an accelerator card? That all depends on what you're doing. If you're using your Amiga mainly for games and WHD load, this is a perfect solution. 100 bucks, you got the memory, you got ability to switch between ROMs, and you've got the other features, and you don't necessarily need all the processing power. Now, if you're going to do what I do and use image effects and art department professional and maybe some 3D rendering software, yeah, spring for something like the $400 Vampire Or maybe one of the new Raptor 1200s that they've just announced. I don't know what the price is on that. But yeah, get yourself some more power if you need it. But if all you're going to be doing is playing games, this is an ideal little add-on for not a big price. The documentation on this is fantastic. It's in Amiga guide format, and they go over a lot of the details about how the device works, how to make the most out of it, some configuration settings that you can make to really utilize the device. I recommend reading it. Overall, thumbs up on this card. For $100, it's a great little add-on for your system. I would like to thank my patrons for helping me out. Here's their beautiful names right here scrolling down your screen. If you'd like to help the channel out, pop on over to patreon.com/10mark. $2 a month, you can make it on this list. And you're supporting the Amiga community. That about sums it up for this week. Pop on over to AmigaKit, put an order in for one of these if you've been looking to add a little bit to your Amiga 1200. Definitely worth it. Like I said, the entire month of May, we're going to be talking about my Amiga 1200. I've got a vampire that I'm going to put in here. We're going to test that, see how that works. I don't own this. This belongs to a friend of mine who kindly lent it to me for a couple of months to do a review on. We're also going to be doing an episode on the benefits of AGA. Now, AGA is so much more than just beautiful gradients. Yes, John, I'm talking to you. Watch the Amigos. It is the funniest, greatest Amiga show out there. But we're going to be getting into the nitty-gritty about the other features of AGA besides just pretty colors that make it a useful upgrade for your Amigas. Thanks for joining me today. I really appreciate it. Be sure to like and subscribe. Tell me what kind of cool things you think we could do with this device in the comments below. But until next time, this is Doug from 10 Minute Amiga Retrocast, signing out.